and a professor of public policy. It's just great to see all of you. I want to acknowledge our partners in this gathering. This was a lot of work by a lot of people, including the City of Pittsburgh and lots of colleagues from the City of Pittsburgh. Of course, my colleagues at Heinz College, the Brookings Institution, Metro 21 Smart Cities, and the team at Covestro. So just to give you a sense of the flow of today, I'm going to provide a few brief scene-setting remarks, and then I'm going to pose questions to our very distinguished panelists. And then we'll have a little bit of a more general conversation, and then we're going to go to your questions. And you will see in front of you two things. One, I hope you recognize as the periodic chart of the Sustainable Development Goals. The other is a note card. So as you have questions that you would like to pose for the panelists, please use the note card. If you have specific people that you want to address, please indicate. We're going to pass those to either end of the aisle, and then colleagues will collect them, call some of them. We don't have a huge amount of time. We have till about 1:20 before another class starts to come in. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the rest of the day, and you know who you are, there will be colleagues holding up also the SDG color wheel that will guide you to where the sessions will be upstairs. You should know that this event is being live streamed, and if you're tweeting, please use the hashtag, everybody say it together, Cities SDGs. Let me hear you say it again. Hashtag Cities SDGs. Okay, all right.
Leadership.
So we're especially pleased to convene this panel because we want to highlight the value proposition for cities and communities in aligning with the framework to set out in the Sustainable Development Goals. We want you to understand that there is already an extensive network in Pittsburgh working to implement the SDGs. And we're especially pleased, of course, to be joined by Mayor Peduto, MacCleary, who's chairman and CEO of Covestro, our distinguished alum, Leah Lizarondo, who's co-founder and CEO of 412 Food Rescue, which if you don't know about it, you will know about it by the end of the day. My colleague, Tony Pipa, senior fellow in global economy and development at the Brookings Institution. So we're here to do something provocative today, which is to talk about a positive agenda, issues that are generally extremely underreported in the press, and yet action that is going on not only in this city, but around the world. Action that is a huge global opportunity to make a more peaceful, prosperous planet and Pittsburgh. So it's a win-win. Raise your hand if walking into this room, you already knew about the SDGs. Awesome. Right. Okay, we've got a lot of champions in the room.
Hello, Pittsburgh.
Hello, Pittsburgh. Yeah. Wow. You know that this is a universal agenda. It applies to all of us. You know that it is a paradigm shift in the sense of sustainability in a 21st century context, which of course includes climate, but it also includes peaceful, just, inclusive societies. And we'll be talking about that. You should know that the periodic chart was formed by, or created by Richard Curtis, fun fact, movie director, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Love Actually, Notting Hill, which if you haven't seen them, I recommend them. So let me also add that what is powerful about this agenda is collective action. And we know this from the predecessor to the SDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. Between 2000 and 2015, we saw a lot of countries come together and do things like by half reduce infant mortality, by half reduce maternal mortality at childbirth. With the SDGs, we can do even more. It's a more ambitious agenda, it's a more complicated agenda, but it's one that literally millions of people around the world weighed in on, particularly youth. Youth were the most engaged in creating this agenda, and then of course there was a lot of negotiation at the UN and colleagues around the world. So what is stopping us from robust implementation? What would it take? To start, we need commitments from citizens, students and universities, cities, the private sector, and others to make this happen. And in fact, this SDG agenda is taking root in cities, and Tony's going to tell you something about that. given the relationship of CMU, Carnegie Mellon University, with the city of Pittsburgh, if it's happening in the city, it's going to be happening at the university. And we're very excited about this. And I won't go into it now, but I want to highlight an initiative that we have with the International Youth Foundation with some support from the Rockefeller Foundation called the Cohort 2030 Initiative. It's about creating and elevating demand by youth to deliver the SDGs and acquiring the skills and engagement to be able to deliver on the SDGs. Those of you born after 1980, you have the most to gain or lose from the robust implementation of this agenda. So let's get started. Mayor Peduto, can you give us the story of Pittsburgh's engagement with the SDGs? Why and how did the city start to look at this agenda, this framework, and from your perspective, what does it concretely give to residents, to folks here?
Oh, a couple of things. Number one, being involved in global initiatives is not something new to Pittsburgh.
Right.
Back in 2011, we became a human rights city, joining cities throughout the world. We have been a cohort of the Rockefeller Foundation as one of the 100 resilient cities around the world. And really, that work, which began back in 2015, mirrors the work of the United Nations with the SDGs. So, important number to remember, 4, 10, 17, 47. It's the combination to my house. No, it is where we basically came from and how this aligns on a global then local level. 4 is P4. When we came into office, we put together what are the principles that are going to guide our decision making and what are the areas that we're going to commit the resources, money, to be able to provide. And that would be around people, planet, place, and performance. From those 4 goals in the work that we did with Brookings back in the early days, we then worked with Rockefeller on developing our own resiliency plan. And we found 10 areas that basically covered the spectrum of over the next 12 years, where are the shocks and stresses going to be in Pittsburgh, and where are the areas that if we're not proactive will get left behind. And those aligned perfectly with the UN's SDGs of 17 areas. So we then began to work to incorporate what may be the missing parts within that in order to come up with a plan. And the plan is 47 separate projects that specifically will allow us over 12 years to be able to address these concerns and align with the UN SDGs through a program that we call OnePGH. And just like the United Nations, they realize that countries can't do it themselves. They need to partner, and that's really the key ingredient. So we reached out to the universities and the hospitals first, and then out to the corporate community and foundations. And we've asked them to join with us in creating an alignment around these 47 separate projects in order to make them happen. Now, how do they happen is a question. They can't happen under old models, and old models are city government. We don't have the capacity to address hunger and poverty. We don't have the capacity to eradicate homelessness. We don't have the ability to create a completed stormwater management system that will limit the need for gray pipes being buried underground. But if we create a separate organization that then helps those that are on the ground addressing hunger and homelessness and being able to use that organization to prop up the nonprofits throughout the city in this region, then we can get to our goals together. So the UN SDGs and OnePGH are mirror images recognizing a few key areas. Number one, you can't do it alone.
Right.
You've got to have partners. Number two, it's going to take additional resources that countries are not investing in, cities are not investing in today. And number three, you have to change the model of delivery in order to be able to do it. Not a top-down government-run type way, but actually working with the organizations that are on the ground in providing the resources.
This is a model of good governance, which is about listening and responding to citizens and making this local. Jerry, you are a very strong advocate of the SDGs, but you're also the CEO of a company, a chemical company.
Yes.
You play a leadership role in several different ways, not only in your company, Covestro, not only in the Allegheny Conference's Community and Sustainability Committee, but also in an alliance that is being created. Tell us about why this is so, how it came about, and is that bottle of water for me that is not terribly sustainable? Thank you
Be
so
very
much.
nice to you.
Thank you.
So you really want to know why this young man sitting up here has an interest in sustainability? Well, look out in the audience, you can see why. We want to attract the best and the brightest. And if you're not doing the right things, you're not going to have a sustainable business very long. But you know, sustainability, if you don't know our company, Covestro, we carved out from Bayer Materials Science, and we're a high-tech polymers manufacturer. We're in the chemical industry. So everybody looks at that and goes, oh, why do you have any interest in something like sustainability? Well, let me give you some reasons. One is we've been actually talking about sustainability for years. And we were actually, you know, a lot of it's been an important role in our business for several years. And we make our advanced materials, and we are actually selling them into the construction industry, the automotive industry, the design industry, to make their products lighter and even more energy efficient. So we had a perfect fit with our customers to improve the sustainability and climate change and so forth. But you know, when we separated from Bayer, became Covestro back in 2015, we decided to embed sustainability into our business and innovation strategy. That was a key decision. And you know, it became the core element, and of course our new identity is around Covestro related to sustainability. We thought that was very important. And if you truly understand this, what's the link between sustainability and why you do this? Well, financial performance is one key reason why you do it. Two is employee engagement, and of course is where we live, the regional quality of life. That to us was important and resonates with all of our employees and to our shareholders. I think that's really important. So what we did was at that time, all of a sudden the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals were announced. And of course when they were announced, I had no idea, but when you read them and you understand them, they gave us information to rally around the whole world. They gave us this gift. So we took this, and we were early adopters of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we used it as a framework to really develop our sustainability strategy. And so at that time, we were going to be bold. You go, let's go out and announce some key goals for us. In 2025, we're going to do this. And one of them was 80% of our R&D project spend must tie into one or more of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That sets the path, the guidelines for all of our people, what they need to work on. And then two, we said, okay, what else we want to do? Well, we're going to anchor our sustainability initiatives and our requirements with all of our suppliers. So 100% of our suppliers, if you want to supply to our company, you have to make sure that you have sustainability goals that align with our company and doing the right practice. One that people say, well, this is easy, maybe it isn't, but reduce our carbon emissions, and that's what we talk about, the CO2, reduce our carbon emissions. We set a goal of 40%, and we said we met that too fast, so we made it 50%, but we're never going to be done. And someone thought that was a goal we should be concerned about. What if you don't meet it? What if you don't set a goal and even try to go towards that? And to me, is set those hefty goals and go, and it drives the culture, what you want to develop. We also said, really important to us on the social side, is improve the lives of 10 million people in underserved markets. And there's various ways you can do that. That's important to a lot of our people to make a difference. And something new is to extract the most value from carbon, and a concept we call carbon productivity. You know, these are the things that we started off with, and just to talk about the importance, why UN Sustainable Development Goals are important. Well, for us, sustainability and innovation, they're hand in hand. We don't separate that. And that's why we use the SDGs to help guide our innovation strategy, help guide our business practices and what we want to do. And if you focus on the right opportunities, and for the short and long term, you're going to sustain your business. You know, when you heard sustainability, it covered everything. And I didn't even know how to define sustainability when it first came out. And so, but it meant different things to different people, to different organizations. And That to me was causing some concern. But you take the SDGs and why they're so important, well, they help take this complex, let's say, topic, and they simplify it, that we can actually find a path, a passion, a reason to make a difference in our communities. And it's more than just climate change, and I think that's important. You know, just to let you know, sustainability, how important it is, it drives almost everything we do in our company, from product and process improvement, value creation, of course, as you mentioned. It is critical. That has to be part of discussion. When we talk about our company, it's safety, sustainability. And how about talent attraction? If we didn't have a sustainability strategy, or a future employer of yours doesn't even have a sustainability strategy, do you want to work for that company? No. You want to work for companies that are leaders in that industry. So of course, the value for us is we get the smartest and the brightest. And that to us is what's going to sustain our business, because we want to do the right thing, even though we're in the chemical industry. There's a lot we can do. Sustainable practices are really good for business, and I know it's really good for our region. So that's really important. And talk about partnerships, I think it's really important, is number 17. It's all about partnerships.
Absolutely.
And we're at the U.S. Green Build, and I was on a panel, and it was brought up there about partnership is the new leadership. That's the only way. This is where we got behind. And so we believe, how do you maximize this impact as an individual company? You can't move the needle. But together and partnering, and what we do is we partner with, you know, if you're talking about academia, you talk about government, civic, you talk about everyone in the manufacturing. If you come together, you can always find areas you can agree on and go forward and make a difference. And so I have Rebecca LaCour here from...
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand, Rebecca. She came up with a vision a few years ago called Think 30. And we said, well, we don't know who's going to show up, but let's give it a shot. And what we wanted to do the first year was introduce the UN SDGs and to start that discussion here. And of course, the mayor's out there, and he's focused on sustainability. He's actually internationally known of trying to make our city more sustainable. And what we're trying to do is get it out to the whole region and help all come together, a partner, to drive that agenda forward and really make a difference. This is my home. I'm going to retire here. I want to live here. I want this to be the best city, and a lot of things we need to address. And SDGs, it's not about just climate. It's about social, environmental. It strengthens our communities. It really does. It makes it more robust, more vibrant for our kids, where we want to live and where we want to stay. So yeah, Think 30 is doing a lot of good things. Let's have some action. We have some more things going on. It keeps growing for us, but it's pretty important. And we have another think tanks coming up, 3 think tanks this year. But yeah, it's something that we really believe in. So, and I've done a lot of other leadership. We can get into that later if you like, but yeah.
Thank you for your leadership. This is, again, a model of good local governance with private sector engaging along with alums and entrepreneurs. You're a distinguished Heinz alum. Raise your hand if you're at Heinz. We take pride in being at the intersection of people, policy, and technology, right? Tell us about how 412 Food Rescue is exactly at that intersection of people, policy, technology, but also how it aligns with this bigger vision of the SDGs. And if you could say a word or two about scaling up, that would be great.
Right. So if you don't know 412 Food Rescue, who doesn't know about 412 Food Rescue? Okay, 412 Food Rescue is a direct response to the fact that we're wasting 40% of our food supply. Who didn't know that we are wasting 40% of our food supply? 40%, so that's great. You know, 2015 when we were founded, most of the room didn't know that we were wasting 40% of our food. And that's almost half our food. And it's enough to feed everyone who is hungry 4 times over. So SDG 12.3 is reduce food waste. SDG 2 is end hunger. So these two are interconnected. And we do that through food recovery, that is mobilizing volunteers, citizens, again talking about engagement, to recover food and reduce food waste. So it's definitely technology and policy. And then how it aligns with the SDGs and scale. So I don't think you can scale without a common measure, without a common language. And ever since we started the SDGs, since the SDGs were launched around the same time that 412 was founded, we've always worked around that framework. And actually, around September, we're going to release a report that takes our impact in Pittsburgh and maps it to the SDGs and our work in other cities.
And wait, why in September?
Why in September? September is, well, a lot of things. It's Hunger Action Month. It's also when the World Economic Forum meeting is. It's when the Champions 123 meeting is. Lots of things happening.
And this year, it's the first time ever that heads of state will gather in New York to measure progress on the SDGs. So it's a big, 2019 is a big year.
Yes, September 2019 is definitely a big month. So, the SDG 12.3 maps to so many other SDGs. It's such a powerful starting point to accomplish many of the other elements in that SDG table. So one of the other, aside from hunger, is that 11, for instance. When we look at emissions, when we look at climate change as well, which is another SDG, 12.3 is such a powerful measure. It's such a powerful step because food waste, a lot of people don't know, is second only to road transport when it comes to its carbon impact. Mm-hmm. So just a little statistic that we just released was that in 3 years, 412 Food Rescue has recovered 6 million pounds of food. The carbon impact of that is equivalent to changing 52,000 light bulbs to LEDs. Guess how many street lights are in Pittsburgh?
40,000.
Correct.
Of course he would know.
Good job, Mary. So it's the same impact. In 3
Not part of
years,
the script.
the same impact as our LED initiative. It's also equivalent to planting 22,000 trees. Guess how many trees Tree Vitalize planted in 5 years? 20,000. And that's only in 3 years. So food waste is a powerful impact, has powerful impacts to the environment. So one of the things we're doing right now is mapping our work in hunger to be actually measurable. So I think one of the biggest concerns I've had when working in hunger policy is that while we measure hunger one way, which is the USDA measure, all of the other nonprofits and NGOs aren't using that same measure. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about lingua franca, when you look at, start researching hunger organizations and look at their impact reports, they will talk about outputs, which is how many pounds of food they've distributed. But then we measure hunger a very different way, which is a population survey of food insecurity. Mm-hmm. So in the SDGs, the measure is called the FIES. This is the food insecurity measure of the FAO, which maps a little bit close to our USDA measure. So one of the things that we are going to advocate for is that if you are a hunger NGO, you must report your results based on these measures, not on your outputs. And we're going to talk about how we do that at 412 Food Rescue.
So one of the real struggles, if you're working on the SDGs, is making it real for people, making it sort of understandable for people. But there's also a situation that we find ourselves in that I want to ask you about, where let's just say that U.S. global leadership is not exactly what it has been in the past, without getting into too much detail other than President Trump saying that he was going to leave the climate agreement, which he can't do until 2020. And then your response that actually Paris to Pittsburgh, this matters here. How important, I mean, there's a real tension. You both have mentioned the UN SDGs. You will note that a lot of colleagues that I work with, we have a lot of ambivalence about talking about this as the UN goals. We don't want people to think this is only the UN, that these are both our goals, they're global goals. And if you spend any time at the UN, it's a complicated place, let's just say that. But having that important local ownership is so critical, and that's why 412 Food Rescue is such a great example. But what role does the let's say, decline in US global leadership play for you? Is it a problem? Is it not a problem? The fact that the federal government is not really engaging on this issue, is it making any difference, or are you finding so much commonality in your other networks, in the city-to-city conversation and in your private sector, that we're doing okay?
Yeah, no, there's been an amazing shift over the past 10 years of the role of cities in addressing major issues, whether it's climate change, which is probably the issue of our lifetime, or it's refugee crisis.
Right.
Organizations, maybe not federal governments, understand that the solutions lie at the local level. They can't be solved on a federal level. It's actually the implementation on the ground at the local level. So cities have begun to network. And even in the past month, 2 of my staff members have been invited to participate with cities from around the world at United Nations events in Geneva and somewhere else. And the idea is that this network has become very real. Through 100 Resilient Cities, Pittsburgh has been working with Accra in Ghana. We've been working with Edinburgh in Scotland. We've been working with Da Nang in Vietnam. And we've been working on compatible, sustainable goals and learning from each other. There is now a new network, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Sustainability and Climate, that 9,300 cities belong to around the world. It has a board representing every continent on this earth by population, and it works on a global basis to help to network the changes that are happening on the local level. I would say that the leadership, or the vacuum of leadership out of Washington, has created the opportunity for cities to push that much faster than what has been happening in the past 5 years.
Really interesting. And for you?
No, I agree. It doesn't matter. The administration's position, that's not going to stop us from doing the right thing. I can speak for the chemical industry because I'm chairman of the board, and I also chair the sustainability committee. I can speak for Covestro. I can speak for our region, of course, too. Yep. Is that we're going to do the right thing and go forward. So we all agree and we all support what I just mentioned to you, the Paris Accord, Paris Agreement. We're going forward with that, and nothing's going to stop us because I think it's going to be done by the people and local, and you can't control that. And so these are the kind of things I think what we spent some time on is really think about the American Chemistry Council, and I have some, I got some peers there sitting there, and they're chemical industry, big companies, oil and gas. They're part of that. And I led a sustainable committee that we agreed on principles of sustainability. 3 years ago, they said, Jerry, what are you doing? You know, what are you kidding me? And we got total agreement to go forward. And what's really interesting now, we're implementing what I call progressive metrics to show our commitment, open, authentic, transparent to everyone of how we're going to make a difference. We want to be part of that solution. We are a part of that solution. But we also know we got some work to do and improve ourselves. This is a journey that we need everybody together, and we need partnerships to make that happen. And we do this here in our Pittsburgh region to help support what we're doing in the city, but also with CEOs for sustainability. I co-chair that, and we're making some progress there. I co-chair that with Ron Godovic from Winstack. And what we're doing is really using this SDGs to help drive and help teach, help inform, help educate, share best practices, gain more of the larger community of moving this forward together. And the more you get on, I took it to Allegheny Conference, the Allegheny Conference on Community Development, and I got that job to chair our sustainability committee.
You volunteered for that job.
Yeah, I volunteered for that. They just said, Jerry, you take care of this. And here's what's important to tie all this and why the local and why you can make a difference is. I said, I will not I will not accept a typical committee that looks like me. It doesn't work, folks. I want a diverse committee. I want every stakeholder involved that has a voice, that has a passion behind this, so we can learn from each other and they can challenge each other. And we did. Grants on the committee, and we had the public, we had manufacturing, we had endowments, we had the academia, nonprofits, all in one room. You should have seen that meeting the first couple times. And today they have learned a lot, and we agreed with 5 new principles that we just announced and rolled out, and it's all supportive of everything we're going to do in this whole community. It's guidelines, what we want to do, and we got it approved at the Allegheny Conference. To me, the train's left the station, People are on board. People want to make a difference, and all we're trying to do is help people what's the best practice in moving forward. So the administration, they can't stop us.
Tony, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I want to talk about just going back to this broader conception of sustainability. As somebody who comes from democracy, human rights, and governance community, it was a hard-fought battle to make sure that peaceful, just, inclusive societies was included in the SDGs. But it was helped by a number of, frankly, women ambassadors from countries that had emerged from conflict or fragile states. And they said, we're not signing on to the SDGs if this is not recognized as part of the agenda, which includes combating human trafficking, reducing all forms of violence, tackling corruption, increasing radically access to justice. But it's still hard for people to get their heads around it. When people think about sustainability, they're mainly thinking either about the environment or economics. When I was last here talking publicly about this, it was the day before the shooting. So for Pittsburgh, it feels to me like there is a way in which this agenda, the 16+ agenda as we call it, peaceful, just, inclusive societies, is personal. I wonder if you could comment on that and how you see both the opportunity, but it's a challenge to make sure that people understand this agenda in the round.
Good,
Mayor?
Well, I guess it goes back for us into the ideas of P4. When we were looking at it, we didn't want to just look through a single lens of what will this decision mean to the planet. It really centered more on the people. You know, Pittsburgh began a program very similar to this back in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and they called it the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was really based around brick and mortar. It was transforming an industrial city to a corporate city. And by the 1970s, Pittsburgh had become the third largest corporate center in the United States, New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh. But it was a concerted effort that was worked between government and corporate. And it transformed really many cities in this country. It created the first redevelopment authority because they realized that city government couldn't do it because they couldn't borrow the types of money that would be needed. It created a parking authority. It created the Allegheny Conference. And it created new organizations in order to be able to do that. What's interesting about that, and why I bring it up, is the Renaissance was followed by the humanist period in history. And that's where we're at. We are beyond brick and mortar, and we are in a position now of recognizing where problems exist, they exist at the human level. And when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with social equity and a lot of other types of issues that are around it, whether it's gender equity, whether it's racial equity, and it has to be a part of that solution. We are so far beyond brick and mortar that really there was no way that you could create SDGs without recognizing the critical components of it. This is not about sustainability under the 1980s definition of environment. It's about sustainability of humankind.
I 100%. Today, the people come first. That's the key. I think that's what, if I can speak for maybe the past, we did reinvent Pittsburgh, but we left too many people behind.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of discussion on it, and discussion is great, but action's needed. And so I would say now we get a lot more agreement that we want to do something. We got to make a difference. We want to go forward. We want this to be a place, our region, our home, that includes everyone. And that's why the sustainability is the 5 principles we came up. If you really read them, it's for everyone. It's inclusion for all. And that's when we started that in our company. We need to have a culture. We had a culture change. Think about the chemical industry. And today, when you look at our senior executives, when you look at our employees, you see the diversity. It makes us so much stronger and better coming up with innovation and in performance. It's just amazing. And of course, that's here. And we spend a lot of time on D&I topics because we think, even if you look at me and go, wow, why do you care? Because I do care. Because it's the right thing to do. Everyone has a voice, has a purpose, and has a value. Everyone. And respect is the key behind that. That's a key for our culture. It's got to be a key for our region. And together, there's nothing, no one can stop us. It is I use this word, there's a movement going on, folks. It's time to take action and do things. And this is it. And I tell you what, it makes me excited to call this my home.
Let me just put this in a larger international context. We are living in a period where we are in a struggle between systems that are open versus systems that are closed. This is an agenda that is nonpartisan, but it is deeply progressive in the sense that it's about inclusivity, diversity, prosperity. Those leaders around the world who are supporting corruption, closing space around civil society, and I have in mind the El-Sisis of the world in Egypt, Vladimir Putin in Russia, and a few others. This is in that context. This is not separate from, this is a part of that. Tony, I want to go to you and reflect on one of the places I think at least Grant was at was Bellagio, Italy, where you hosted a meeting of cities from around the world at the Rockefeller Center's Bellagio place. And talk about what you were hearing there, and then I'm going to go to a question, and I'm going to first direct it at Leah.
Great. So having this conversation here today actually puts Pittsburgh in the vanguard of a movement of cities worldwide that are really using the sustainability goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, as their blueprint for community action. And sort of why is that, right? And you've already heard it. You've already heard the themes echoed here. First off, city governments are very close to their citizens because they have to respond. They see what happens and they feel it immediately on issues of inequality, of prosperity that's not shared equally, on issues of sustainability, environmental sustainability. But sustainability for them is not that definition just about the environment, but it is about the community being sustainable over the long period. So what's really interesting is to have a growing movement of cities worldwide using the SDGs, because after all, the SDGs were agreed at the national level.
Yes, we've done the negotiation. It's over, folks.
The goals and the targets were at the national and the global level. And there's even a city's goal, right? There's a goal 11 that's cities. But what I'm talking about is cities themselves saying this entire framework applies to us, who we are locally. It gives us a common language. It gives us a common language that cuts across our city agencies. It gives us a common language that brings together lots of different stakeholders that is very representative of this panel right here. Our private sector, our universities, our nonprofit and philanthropic sector, and our city government. And as the mayor said, city government can't do it all. And so we have, in the U.S., we had participation from cities like New York City, Los Angeles, Orlando, Pittsburgh. There's cities in Hawaii, there's San Jose, California, and then you have cities globally as diverse as Mexico City, Durban, and Accra, but also Malmö, Sweden, Mannheim, Germany, Yokohama, Japan. And for them, it allows a platform to do interesting things that brings different parts of the city together to be able to make progress on that wider definition of sustainability. So for Orlando, for example, they're using the SDGs.
Raise your hand, Chris.
In
Orlando, in the room.
In a regional resilience planning process with the counties that surround it and all of the different towns and cities that are part of it. It becomes the lingua franca. It becomes the common framework from which everyone can get on the same page and work together. In Los Angeles, they had 4 universities working with the city to, again, be at the cutting edge of using data and evidence on what progress looks like and how you hold yourself accountable to that particular kind of progress. Malmö and Bristol are actually changing their procurement policies to reflect what the SDGs look like and ensure that their engagements with their vendors are being sustainable and are also being shared widely in equitable fashion. And so if you think about what a local icon here, Mr. Rogers, used to say, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and we want to make sure that it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood for everyone, both today and in 2030, this is a growing movement that allows what local progress looks like for local citizens actually contributes to a global movement and global progress on some very big issues that we're all grappling with, and provides a positive way for citizens and for stakeholders to engage.
Let's dig down a little bit more in terms of universities. Leah, where do you see the opportunity both for CMU but for Heinz? And then a question for you, Mayor. What responsibilities do you think the Pittsburgh University community has to help as you go forward? But Leah, first, where do you see the opportunities for both CMU and Heinz?
Right. As you know, ever since I'm an entrepreneur in residence at the Block Center, and as soon as I took on that position, I sought out Sarah because one of the things, as you know, because I'm here, one of the things I believed in was framing our work, even education, around the SDGs. Primarily because it is the universal language. It is a language that we all have to speak. It is a way for everyone to be accountable. So I think the role for Heinz in the way that it delivers its work is that we have to always think about, in all, whether it's policy, whether we're building big technological networks or technological innovations, we have to always go back to why we're doing it. And a great way to answer why we're doing it is to map it towards the SDGs. And then a great way to understand whether we're successful or not is, again, to map our accountability towards the SDGs. And before we can be accountable, everything has to be measurable. So I think one of the things that I want to leave as I kind of wrap up my first year as EIR is this way of thinking. So just this semester, I co-taught a mini with Rick Stafford where we looked at rural hunger in Greene County. And the way we did that was we actually took Heinz students to Greene County. I mean, I know when I was at Heinz, I barely went beyond Oakland. I did not go beyond Oakland. And so it was really refreshing and really eye-opening to bring students to Greene County. And Greene County is very different from Pittsburgh. And so I think that's the role of universities, is to really, truly operationalize this very lofty framework to make it something that we can actually realize.
We're very excited about the idea of universities and cities partnering. Mayor, what do you think?
Before I answer that, I just want to go back to the Bristol Malmo example of procurement as a way to reaching goals. Last month we had a meeting in Toledo, Ohio. It's great to see you here from Orlando. You did great in Paris to Pittsburgh.
Yes. We have movie stars with us.
But one of the first people that called me after Tree of Life was Mayor Buddy Dwyer. And he gave me advice about what you need to do. And we talked at the U.S. Conference of Mayors this year with the mayor of Parkland as well. And we realized that we need to create a committee on trauma. We don't have one at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. But it's being reactionary. So in Toledo, we gathered, there were over a dozen mayors and police chiefs, ATF, FBI. And we started talking about an idea. We buy a lot of bullets. We buy a ton of bullets as cities. We buy a lot of guns. I buy nearly 1,000 guns. Big, we're a major buyer. Why aren't we putting on that procurement, buying bullets only from companies that don't create cop killer bullets? Why don't we put on the distributor, buying only off distributors that don't sell semi-automatic or assault rifles to civilians, but only sell to government authority? And if we do that, and New York does it, which has 40,000 police officers, and LA does it, in Dallas, in Oklahoma City, in Parkland, in Orlando, in San Bernardino, and Pittsburgh, imagine the effect that would have on the market. Now, imagine the same thing if we were purchasing based upon SDGs. We could change the industry internally by people's governments around the world. There's a very, very interesting concept. It's looking at it in a different way, but still getting to that same result. As far as the universities, partnering in efforts like that, looking for the alignment of mission and goal in order to say, if we pull resources together, how can we get to that change that we're looking at? The old model is pilots, payments in lieu of taxes. A big cardboard check every year where the chancellor and the president stand there. Look what we're giving back to the community. And then it goes into this pool of money. Council members pull it in every direction. Pet projects are done. Paving gets an extra mile. And we cut around the edges of SDGs and we say we used a better pavement or something. Or we work together with the universities, with the hospitals, with the nonprofits, with the foundations, with the corporations, and we directly address the problems, and the money goes directly to the people who need to be able to have that help. It goes to feeding the hungry and sheltering the homeless and creating affordable housing and clean water systems and cleaner air, and it follows into a direct path. We have to be able to break away from the mindset that just because this is the way we did it before, it's the best way. And you have to create models that more directly affect how we get to each of those 17 goals.
I want to pull out two things. One is, in a lot of ways, you with your mayor colleagues are also listening and responding to the voices of youth, obviously. There's a lot of youth agency on this issue. We recently did, we had a pro bono survey of youth done by a company called Kantar in Pittsburgh on issues related to human trafficking, corruption, reducing violence, and access to justice. We found a huge amount of interest among Pittsburgh youth on combating human trafficking, which frankly surprised me, but particularly on using their purchasing power. That there's a sense that using the market to be able to advance this agenda. I don't want to buy goods that involved slave labor, and I want to know whether or not my food or whether or not my clothing or what I'm using in terms of an iPhone has been touched by this. So I think there's a huge, you could be the generation that makes a huge shift in how we think about this issue. It's oftentimes looked at as a law enforcement issue. Obviously, that's important, and prosecution is important, and supporting survivors. But youth in Pittsburgh are also interested in this issue, which affects every city. This is not something that happens far away. It happens in the United States as well in other countries. I wonder if anybody else wants to respond to this very powerful example of the mayors and the guns.
Well, if you want to change behavior, you change how you procure. Consumers control our markets. And that's why we put in instantly with all of our suppliers in procurement that you will live up to the same standards we hold to ourselves when it comes to sustainability. And we're one of the founders of an organization called Together for Sustainability. And it's a few chemical companies got together, so let's do the right thing. Then we use EcoVadis. EcoVadis is internationally known for doing the surveys and then follow up with the audits. And so if you want to work with our company, you want to purchase from our company, then you need to follow and show improvements each year on your journey for improving your sustainability, which includes all the 17 UN goals. So it's about that. We want to work with companies that are doing the right thing. And we won't work with companies who are trying to do the wrong thing. And we won't sell to companies who do the wrong thing. This is how you change the behavior. And when you are larger and become larger and you get that movement going, you change behavior. And then you can get there without the regulations and legislation sometimes.
Tony?
Well, and to Mayor Peduto's earlier was talking about sort of the city-to-city networks that Pittsburgh has participated in. And it was interesting how quickly in the conversation we had with the 14 cities that were there about how the SDGs could provide a platform for collective action together as cities shaping the market, both in terms of procurement, but also even in demand, in the ways in which they're demanding financing and looking for financing together. And this is sort of an organic movement, right? There's not an official network set up for cities that are doing the SDGs, but because of the
Not yet, anyway.
Right, but because of the global purview of it, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think I would also come back, and we've said it a couple of times here today, but this idea of governance and a model of governance that's both open and different, to the mayor's point, it was really in full display amongst those particular cities. It is about bringing lots of different parts of the city together to be pulling on the same way toward the same North Star. And look, putting out an actual tangible goal that you're measuring yourself toward and being transparent about is about as clear a commitment as you can make. And you may or may not reach that goal. And what we've learned on the global stage is sometimes you don't always reach the goal, but it is still a stimulant and a catalyst for incredible progress. And as long as you're doing that and you're all on the same page, you can really do some interesting things and make serious progress.
A stands for ambition. Okay, I'm going to ask a softball question and then a hardball question. This comes from a fellow beard bro. It says, who is your barber? Okay.
Very easy. Grams of Lawrenceville. So let me just tell you about Grams real quick. Grams.
Why not?
It's hipster heaven. At the last time that I went, I had Mr. Graham cut it, and he said, "Here's your key." I said, "Okay." What does it open? He takes me into the next room, and there's this locker system. He goes, "You like bourbon, right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you can leave your bourbon in here, so the next time you come, you can have a little bourbon." So he has a customer for life for as long as I have a beard.
Okay, so these are a group of slightly related questions. And again, we're going to the slightly more challenging realms, which you may need a bourbon for. What about a tax to support sustainability efforts? How can civic leadership or civil society sell that to people? And I'm going to build on another one. How does the city engage local nonprofits, particularly who provide direct human services in these SDGs? How do you make these long-term goals meaningful to the folks who are on the ground working to alleviate poverty every day?
Can I take the second one? First one's really hard, and it's sort of above my pay grade. I wish I knew the answer to that.
So you're dodging the tax question.
Yeah, no, not the tax. On the how do you communicate against the negative effect? You know, how do you deal with people that says climate change isn't real to begin with?
That's another question that people have is how do you, what's the narrative to bring people on board when there are a lot of people who are very skeptical?
Yeah, I don't know. But
work in progress.
The second one I do.
Answer cloudy, ask later.
The best example I can give when partnering with nonprofits, and that's a whole new model of government. I mean, I've worked down in City Hall for 20-some years, and we really didn't have direct partnerships with nonprofits before. We would have them at the meeting. We would ask them what they were doing, and then we'd go back and do our own thing and try to find a way to make sure we're not falling over each other. Michelle Obama put out a challenge to end veteran homelessness. And she announced it at the National League of Cities. And cities around the country then took on the challenge. Okay, I don't have a department of homelessness. You know, I don't have the director of homelessness. I now have a person who works in critical communities who works in my office, and she runs this type of an organization. But we had to find the organizations that could actually do it. So we went out and we met with Operation Safety Net, Mercy Behavioral Health, Dr. Withers, who actually provides street medicine, and then the Western Pennsylvania Veterans Leadership Program. And we brought them all together, and we were able to come up with the county, in partnership with the county, a count of, I think, 423 identifiable veterans that didn't have a secure place to stay. It didn't mean they were sleeping under a bridge. Some of them were, but others were sleeping on their brother's couch down in the basement or going to different locations. We were able to take that number to 21. From 423 to 21 within 2.5 years. Because, again, we were able to empower the nonprofits to do more than they were doing. We didn't try and say it has to be under city government. We said city government has to empower others. If I tried to do what Leah did, and you have to check out her app and you should volunteer and be a part of it, but it would be stuck in an office and there would be somebody in it. it would be there, and we could say we'd do it, but it would never have the success that she has around it. So my job isn't trying to replicate.
That's because she's a Heinz alum.
But my job isn't trying to replicate it. It's to empower her to do even more. And sometimes, and like you said, the partnership is the new leadership. Sometimes the role of government isn't actually to do, but to empower.
You have any ask of the mayor that you want to make?
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
This is live streamed. So
Yes, that's true. This is live streamed.
But that's also a great example of the power of a goal.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That was a challenge that
Right.
Michelle Obama put out, and that goal becomes galvanizing as well to lots of different stakeholders.
Well, these are moonshots, to be frank, and there is a way in which having a moonshot is, people understand it, they get behind it. You don't necessarily have to find every single part of the SDGs exciting. You got to figure out where your passion points align, and get busy and get active. I do want to touch on, and maybe Tony, you want to talk to this, this issue of tax. We have in Paris a situation where, in France, we have a president, Macron, who's very interested and supportive, not only of, obviously, of climate, but climate change and the pact that he helped launch, but also of the SDGs in general. And he put a tax on, and the yellow vests, there was a lot of protest. He wasn't engaging with the mayors. He went too fast. He wasn't modeling good governance. He wasn't listening and responding to citizens. To what extent, I mean, were people in Bellagio at the meeting you convened, was that a conversation that people sort of, what are those risks of either stirring up citizens, not responding to citizens, asking too much?
Well, I think first off, because you're talking at a different level of government, there is a heightened sensitivity to leaving neighborhoods or people behind as well. So I think, I don't know if it was Jerry or the mayor who said it earlier, but that theme of leave no one behind is real. And so the inclusivity, and to the mayor's point of how you empower different parts of the city to be able to working together is very real. But the cities in Bellagio also, so they sort of boiled down the 17 to 3, and it's those three different lenses, sort of the human and social, as well as the economic, but that prosperity needing to be for all. So there's economic and equity, as well as environmental and action on climate change. And so the challenge is to be thinking about all those three things at once and to be thinking in an integrated way. So if you do that, then you're passing a tax, but it's going to have negative effect on livelihoods, you can't be making progress on one at the expense of the other. And so you need to be thinking in multiple dimensions at once, and that is the challenge of the SDGs.
The best practice is to be thinking in terms of clusters, that there are integrated. I want to ask a question of you that is sort of the equivalent of tax, but for private sector. I'm going to have a little trouble reading the handwriting, but one of the main markers distinguishing sustainability in the chemical industry for the early 21st century versus the, let's say, new sustainability needs was previously the changes happened to be cost saving. How does the industry have changes to respond to increasingly urgent, non-cost saving sustainability needs?
Yeah. Well, there we go. We've got some good questions out there for us.
We're in the challenging section.
I'll use my business. We're in a commodity type business. We're a specialty, we sell parts of it, but we're in commodity. And the commodity gets to be low cost leader. And we are low cost leaders, and we're very proud of that, but it's a very difficult road, and you got to stay there. But we also know that we have the key responsibility. One key responsibility is our safety of our people and our plants and the environment we work, and also the communities where we work. That's number one. That's our license to operate, and we have to keep it safe. We sign up as industry to responsible care principles. I put my name on it. I'm legally held responsible for that, to take every action I can to protect everyone that works in my company, and to do the right thing. That says people, planet, and prosperity, and that's talking about the environment also. Give you, here we go on topic, single-use plastics packaging, okay? Take that as came up, and of course, as an individual who saw those pictures from National Geographic, it was sickening. Sickening for me, my family, sickening for our employees, our shareholders.
You're talking about plastics in oceans.
Plastics in the ocean, but plastics waste, but
Animals.
plastics in the ocean and life below water. And you want to know what would the industry would do. It's easy to say, it's not my problem, somebody else got to do it. No, we didn't. We don't make any of those materials, but it doesn't matter. I know companies who do. We rallied around it, we're going to make a difference. So what we did was started a new organization, global, called Alliance to End All Plastic Waste. The commitment was to sign up. Our goal was $1.5 billion to raise immediately to make a difference. But we need partnerships, we need innovation, we need to understand new waste management systems in every part of the world, no matter where the waste is coming from, even though we know there's certain countries and certain regions of the world where it comes from. They don't have the infrastructure, and we're going to make a difference. So we put our money, when you talk about low cost, but then you start raising millions of dollars a year you have to put in to start this journey down this road to make sure that we end all waste, plastics waste, into any landfill, into the environment, to how to recover, how to reuse, how to recycle, how to start the circularity discussion that we need to do, how to change innovation, that we capture carbon out of CO2 and reuse it, which it's being done. There's so much out there, so we put our money where our mouth is under a constraint that we might not have a great year, but you know what? These are certain things that you're licensed to operate, to exist, to sustain your business. And you do these type of things, we can also attract the smartest and brightest. This is the right thing to do. The whole industry got together. This is beyond our industry. It's now Procter & Gamble. We have downstream. We have so many people now involved, and they want to make a difference. And this is working with you in it and others. So that's where we put the money where the mouth is, and we're raising a lot of money to do the right thing.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting question, and in you know, being at Heinz, when we talk about social entrepreneurship, I think whoever asked that question, it's true that what used to be the driver for sustainability was below the line. It was a cost driver. But I think as awareness for sustainability rises, you know, you see all the market studies where millennials are preferring companies that are sustainable, that have a sustainable mission, or are more than, you know, a single bottom line. I think at the end of the day, the market will drive an above the line driver to how corporations look at sustainability. That is, their revenue actually depends on it, not just their cost.
We're coming to the end of our time. Let's go through a lightning round of final thoughts that you would like to share with this audience. Tony, we want to start with you?
Sure. I think the one thing I will say is that I think, you know, watch this space, but I think the growing importance of cities and the power of cities to actually shape and deliver on this agenda is real. And I think Pittsburgh being in a leadership role and having the stakeholders here today can play a real leadership role, both on doing it for themselves here in Pittsburgh, but also globally.
Sustainable future requires collaboration, period. Partnerships to new leadership, and must be done. And we need everyone. And you're talking about individuals, academic, communities, governments, business, and so forth. And my ask to CMU, you're one of the greatest universities in the world. And we work with you closely, and we hire people here. You can do anything you put your mind to. You want to help this local community, all the nonprofits we have, they need your help. There's a lot of, let's say, redundancy. And a lot of activity going on. You got a lot of good-hearted, passionate people who want to make a difference. But using your data analytics and other mass data and helping us to combine the network and bring all this together to help improve the efficiency and productivity and really make a difference, that would be phenomenal.
Leah, Mayor?
I think if there's one thing, it's demand measurable action and, you know, emphasis on measurable. I think the UN SDGs, you know, when you look at it, can be easily, you know, relegated to a concept. But, you know, as students, as you go out into the world, as you start working, you know, don't keep it within a philosophy. Keep it in your bottom line. Keep it, demand numbers, demand how you're actually going to measure up.
Yeah.
Do you remember that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the Ark of the Covenant is pushed into a warehouse by a government worker, and they just see all the boxes. And
I don't think they were born.
Chris remembers.
Okay. I remember though.
You remember that?
I remember it.
To me, that's what
That was good, Leah.
this means if we were to leave it to federal governments to solve the problem. That if the UN had come up with these SDGs and said, okay, countries, implement it. There's so many other things that nations are doing. They're dealing with starvation and other things, that it really is the new model of getting things done. And it's not local government, but it's local organizations that address these 17 issues on a daily basis. And the question is, how do we provide the resources to them in order to be able to do more? And then the question becomes, well, how do we change the model of delivery so that it's streamlined in a process to help people? So we are at a very interesting time in the history of nations. Up until, I don't know how many years ago, 500-600 years ago, we were ruled by city-states. And then the notion of countries became a thing. And then throughout our lifetimes and the lifetimes of our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, that's how things got done. Now, I'm not saying we're de-evolutionizing.
Just going back to the city-state, I can see this.
Yes, but there is more of an emphasis on local than national to solve the problems of global.
I want to leave you with the thought that, you know, we live in a time where you hear a lot of bad news. And it's very important to understand it's easy to be cynical about an aspirational agenda, but you need to keep in your mind, I think, and in your heart, the fact that there is activity going on around the world on this, and it's frankly all up to us. I mean, either this happens and we lean in and we do it, or it's not going to happen. And you can see on this stage tremendous leadership, and you are the leaders of today and tomorrow, and we'll be relying on you. A logistic note, Marie, do you want to hold up the color wheel? If you are joining us for the next bit of this, please follow the people with the color wheel, and they will guide you. Please join me in thanking our extraordinary panelists.